Holden Anderson stood frozen in the sterile hallway, his gray eyes fixed on the closed door ahead. Behind it, machines beeped in rhythm with a heartbeat that wasn't his, but might as well have been. His hands, which had signed billion-dollar deals without trembling, shook as they gripped a small velvet box. "Mr. Anderson?" The doctor's voice was gentle. "She's asking for you." He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because walking through that door meant facing the truth he'd spent 6 months running from. That love, real, devastating, world-altering love, had found him in the last place he'd ever expected. And now it might slip through his fingers like water. Holden, her voice weak but unmistakable, reached him through the door. And just like that first day in the gallery, Renee Parker pulled him forward when everything else told him to turn back. But wait, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into this story, I need to send some amazing shout-outs to the incredible souls who make this channel possible. To Lottie Hicks from New Orleans. Your spirit and support light up every story we tell. Thank you for being here. To Olive Beckford. Your loyalty and beautiful energy inspire us to keep creating stories that touch the heart. And to both Charlotte and Darlene Jackson from Texas. You two queens represent everything powerful about love and support. Thank you for riding with us on this journey. Now, let's go back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, the Caldwell Gallery opening was the kind of event Holden Anderson attended out of obligation, not interest. His assistant had insisted. Good optics, philanthropic angle, tax write-off, the usual corporate justifications that governed his life. He stood near the champagne fountain, checking his watch every 30 seconds when he saw her. Renee Parker moved through the gallery like she was part of the art itself. Her long twists swept over one shoulder as she studied a canvas, her dark skin luminous under the gallery lights. She wore a simple amber dress that somehow made everyone else look overdressed. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped him cold. It was the way she stood before that painting, completely absorbed, as if the rest of the room had ceased to exist. She was looking at her own work. Transcendent, isn't it? An older woman beside him, the gallery owner, gestured toward Renee. That's the artist. Renee Parker. Incredible talent, though she refuses to charge what she's worth. Why? Holden found himself asking. She says, art shouldn't be a commodity reserved for the wealthy. Idealistic, impractical. The woman sighed. Beautiful. Holden watched Renee turn away from her painting and crouch down to speak with a young girl who'd been tugging her mother's hand. She listened intently to whatever the child said, nodding with complete seriousness, then pulled out a small sketchpad and drew something that made the girl's face light up like sunrise. Something in his chest cracked open. He approached as she stood, dusting off her dress. That was kind, he said. What you just did. Renee looked up, and her eyes, deep brown and impossibly clear, met his with a directness that made him feel transparent. She had something to say about the colors. Turned out, she was right. You're the artist. I paint, yes. She studied him with the same intensity she'd given the canvas. You're Holden Anderson. You know me? Your company tried to buy the building that houses the community center where I teach art to kids. Her voice was calm, factual. We fought you for 8 months. You won. The memory surfaced. A property acquisition his development team had handled. He'd signed off without a second thought. I didn't. I wasn't aware of the specifics. No, she said softly. I imagine you weren't. It wasn't accusatory. Somehow, that made it worse. What happened to the kids? He asked. We found another space. Smaller. We make it work. She glanced at her painting. We always do. Before he could respond, someone called her name. She nodded politely at him and walked away, and Holden stood there feeling like he'd just failed a test he hadn't known he was taking. He bought all 6 of her paintings that night, anonymously. Renee was surprised when Holden showed up at the community center 3 weeks later. Not at the new building. That would have been too easy. He'd tracked down the converted warehouse in South Brooklyn where she taught Tuesday and Thursday evenings. He stood in the doorway, wildly out of place in his tailored suit, watching 15 kids aged 6 to 16 sprawled on drop cloths, with paintbrushes in hand. "You lost?" Renee asked, not looking up from where she was helping a boy mix the perfect shade of blue. "I wanted to see what I'd destroyed." That made her look up. His face was serious, those gray eyes holding something she couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe. Curiosity. "You didn't destroy anything," she said. "You just made it harder. Can I help?" She almost laughed. "You paint?" "No, but I can follow instructions." And that's how Holden Anderson, CEO of Anderson Global Properties, spent his evening washing paintbrushes, organizing supplies, and listening to a 10-year-old named Trinity explain why purple was objectively the best color for painting feelings. As they locked up the center that night, Renee finally asked, "Why are you really here?" Holden was quiet for a long moment. "Because you looked at me like I could be better than I am. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." The honesty in his voice disarmed her completely. "Coffee?" she offered. "I'd like that." They ended up at a 24-hour diner, sharing pie and talking until 3 a.m. Holden told her about growing up as the only child of parents who showed love through expectations. About building an empire because it was what you did when you were in Anderson. About waking up at 42 and realizing he couldn't remember the last time he'd done something simply because it mattered. Renee told him about growing up in Detroit, about her mother who cleaned houses, and her father who drove buses and somehow saved enough to send her to art school. About choosing to teach instead of chasing gallery fame, because she remembered being that kid who thought art was for other people, not for girls who looked like her. "You make me feel like I've been sleepwalking," Holden said quietly. "Maybe you have been," Renee replied. "But you're here now. That counts for something." When he drove her home, insisted on it despite her protests. He asked if he could see her again. "I teach Thursday," she said. "I'll bring better brushes." She smiled, and it felt like winning. 3 months in, they fell into each other like water finding its level. Holden showed up every Tuesday and Thursday, trading his suits for jeans, learning the names of every kid, funding supplies without making it obvious. He watched Renee teach and saw a kind of wealth he'd never understood. The wealth of purpose, of connection, of mattering in ways that couldn't be quantified. Renee found herself drawn to the man beneath the billionaire. The way he listened completely when she spoke. How he asked questions that showed he was really trying to understand, not just waiting for his turn to talk. The vulnerability he showed when he admitted he'd never thought about what his success cost other people. Their first kiss happened in the gallery storage room, surrounded by canvases, after Renee had been ranting about a grant rejection for the center. "You're magnificent when you're angry," Holden had said. "I'm always magnificent," she'd shot back. True. And then he'd kissed her like he'd been thinking about nothing else for weeks. Because he had been. It was a Thursday evening when everything changed. Renee noticed her first. A girl, maybe 13, lingering outside the community center windows. She'd been there the past 3 sessions, always watching, never coming in. Dark hair, hollow eyes, clothes that hung off her thin frame. On the 4th Thursday, Renee went outside. "You can come in, you know," she said gently. "Class is free." The girl flinched, started to run. "Wait." Renee held up her hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just thought You seem interested in art. The girl stopped, turned slowly. Up close, Renee could see bruises fading on her arms, the way she held herself like prey anticipating a predator. I can't, the girl whispered. Why not? He doesn't let me go anywhere. I snuck out. Her voice cracked. I have to get back before he notices. Every instinct in Renee screamed danger. Who? Who doesn't let you go anywhere? The girl's eyes filled with tears. Please. I shouldn't have come. What's your name? Renee asked softly. A long pause. Zoe. Zoe, are you safe? Where you're staying, are you safe there? The look in Zoe's eyes answered everything. Renee called Holden the moment Zoe disappeared down the street. I need your help, she said, voice shaking. I think I just met a child who's being held against her will. Holden was at the center in 15 minutes. Over the next 2 weeks, they worked carefully. Holden used his resources to hire a private investigator. Renee gained Zoe's trust slowly. The girl kept returning to the center. Always scared, always looking over her shoulder. She wouldn't give details, but she'd started drawing in class, and her art told the story her words couldn't. Dark rooms, locked doors, men's faces she'd been taught to smile for. Her talent is extraordinary, Renee told Holden one night, tears streaming down her face as she showed him Zoe's sketchbook. She could be anything, Holden. She could be everything. And someone is destroying her. The investigator's report came back with a name. Kent Whitmore. Real estate developer, hotel magnate, pillar of the community. And according to whispered rumors, the investigator had chased down a man who ran an operation, moving vulnerable girls through his properties. We need to go to the police, Holden said. With what? Rumors? A scared child who won't testify because she's terrified? Renee's voice was fierce. We need proof. Renee, this man is dangerous. So am I, she interrupted. When it comes to protecting children. Renee's opportunity came at a fundraiser. One of those glittering events where money and power mingled freely. Kent Whitmore was being honored for his charitable work with disadvantaged youth. The irony made Renee sick. She'd convinced Holden to get them invited. As Whitmore accepted his award, smiling that practiced smile, Renee stood up. I have a question for Mr. Whitmore, she called out, voice carrying across the ballroom. The room went silent. Holden's hand found hers under the table, squeezed in warning. Whitmore's smile didn't waver. Of course. Always happy to engage with concerned citizens. Where is Zoe Martinez? Renee asked. 13 years old, dark hair, currently missing. Last seen near one of your properties. The smile finally cracked. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because she's told me about the hotel, about the locked rooms, about the men who... This is slander, Whitmore cut in smoothly. Security, please escort this woman out. But Renee kept talking as 2 security guards approached. She's a child, Mr. Whitmore. A talented, brilliant child who deserves to be free. And if you think your money and connections will protect you forever. The guards grabbed her arms. Holden stood immediately, his voice dangerous. Let her go. Holden, it's okay, Renee said quietly. She looked directly at Whitmore. I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not going to stop looking for her. As they escorted her out, she saw something flicker in Whitmore's eyes. Fear. Good. The fallout was immediate. The story hit social media. Grainy phone footage of Renee's accusation, Holden defending her, Whitmore's composure cracking. Find Zoe started trending. News outlets picked it up. And Kent Whitmore, billionaire philanthropist, went into damage control mode. You shouldn't have done that, Holden told Renee in his car afterward, though his voice held more awe than anger. You just made yourself a target. I know, she said quietly, but I had to do something. I couldn't just let him keep hurting her. Holden pulled her close. We'll find her. I promise. I'll use every resource I have. I love you, Renee whispered against his chest, for standing with me, for not trying to stop me. I love you too, he replied, even when you're terrifyingly brave. 3 days later, Zoe was found. A raid on one of Whitmore's properties, prompted by anonymous tips and mounting public pressure, uncovered 6 girls, including Zoe. They were safe. They were free. Renee wept when she got the news. That night, she organized a celebration at the community center. All the kids came. Trinity made a banner. There was pizza and sparkling cider and so much laughter it felt like the walls couldn't contain it. Renee stood in the center of it all, radiant with joy. Holden watched her from across the room and thought about the ring he'd bought yesterday. About the future he wanted to build with this impossible, courageous woman. She caught his eye and smiled, and his heart stopped. Then she swayed. Renee? Trinity's voice worried. Renee's hand went to her chest. Her breathing quickened. I don't. Something's wrong. She collapsed before Holden could reach her. The world fractured into pieces. Holden was on his knees beside her, cradling her head, shouting for someone to call 911. The kids circled them, crying. Imani appeared from somewhere, taking charge, getting everyone back. Stay with me, Holden begged, Renee's eyes fluttering. Please, baby, stay with me. Can't. Breathe. She gasped. The ambulance felt like it took years. In the emergency room, they wouldn't let him go with her. He stood in that sterile waiting room, surrounded by crying children and Imani's steady presence, and felt his entire world tilting off its axis. His phone buzzed. James, he answered without thinking. Holden, I just saw the news. Is Renee okay? I don't know, Holden said, voice hollow. She just collapsed. They won't tell me anything. James, I can't. If something happens to her. She's strong. She's going to be okay. But he didn't know that. Nobody knew that. When the doctor finally came out, her face was grave. Mr. Anderson? We've stabilized her, but we need to run tests. Her symptoms are consistent with poisoning. The word hit him like a bullet. What? We found elevated levels of digitalis in her system. It's a cardiac glycoside. In high doses, it can cause heart failure. Did she have access to any medications? Any plan? No, Holden interrupted, his mind racing. No, she wouldn't. And then it clicked. Kent Whitmore. The doctor frowned. I'm sorry. But Holden was already moving, phone to his ear, calling his head of security. I need everything on Kent Whitmore. Phone records, financial transactions, employee lists. Someone got to her, and I want to know who and how. Imani grabbed his arm. Holden, what are you talking about? His voice was cold, controlled. The voice of a man who'd built empires and crushed competitors. She exposed him. She freed those girls, and he tried to kill her for it. They let him see her an hour later. She was unconscious, hooked to monitors that beeped steadily. Her beautiful face was peaceful, unaware of the storm gathering in her wake. Holden sat beside her bed and took her hand carefully. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have protected you better. I should have seen this coming. His voice cracked. But I swear to you, Renee. I swear on everything I am. He will pay for this. They all will. He kissed her knuckles, tasting salt from his own tears. Just come back to me, he breathed. Please. Come back. I can't do this without you, he whispered, tears streaming freely down his face. I don't want to. Before you, I was just existing. And then you walked into my life and showed me what it means to actually live." His thumb traced circles on her palm, desperate for any response. "I need you, Renee." His voice cracked completely. "You don't get to leave me all by myself." He pressed his forehead against their joined hands and wept like he hadn't since he was a child, while the machines beeped their steady rhythm and the world held its breath. Holden Anderson had built his fortune through strategic thinking and calculated risks. But this wasn't business. This was war. Over the next 18 hours, while Renee underwent emergency treatment to flush the poison from her system, Holden unleashed everything he had. His security team traced the catering company that had provided food for the celebration. One of the delivery workers had been hired 2 days before. A temp, paid in cash, who disappeared after the event. Security footage showed him tampering with Renee's drink. The temp's burner phone led to a number that led to an account that led, eventually, to one of Kent Whitmore's shell companies. Holden called in every favor he had. Federal investigators, journalists, prosecutors he donated to over the years. He handed them a case wrapped in a bow, financial records showing payments to the temp, connections to the trafficking ring, evidence of witness intimidation. Kent Whitmore was arrested at 3 a.m. in his penthouse. James arrived from San Francisco to find Holden in the hospital waiting room, surrounded by manila folders and his laptop, still working. "Man, you look like hell," James said gently. "He tried to kill her," Holden said without looking up, "because she had the courage to speak up. Because she cared more about a child she barely knew than her own safety." His voice broke. "And I wasn't there to protect her." "You're protecting her now. It's not enough." Holden finally looked at his friend, and James saw devastation in his eyes. "What if she doesn't wake up? What if the last thing I said to her was that I'd see her later, like it didn't matter? Like we had all the time in the world?" James sat beside him. "Then you'll live with that. But she's going to wake up, Holden. And when she does, you'll tell her everything you didn't get to say." Trinity showed up first, then the other kids from the center. Imani had tried to keep them away. Too much, too scary. But they'd insisted. "She's our teacher," Trinity said fiercely. "We want to be here." So they filled the waiting room. 15 children with art supplies, drawing pictures for Renee's room, writing cards, supporting each other with the resilience of youth. Zoe came too with her social worker. She was still fragile, still healing, but she brought a drawing. Renee, surrounded by light, with wings. "She saved me," Zoe whispered to Holden, pressing the drawing into his hands. "Please tell her she saved me." Holden looked at this child. This brave, broken, healing child, and understood exactly why Renee had risked everything. "I will," he promised. "When she wakes up, I'll tell her." The doctors said the surgery was necessary. The poison had damaged her heart, and they needed to repair it before permanent damage set in. 7 hours, they estimated. Holden stood in the hallway outside her room before they took her. And this is where we began. Shaking, terrified, holding a ring and a promise he might never get to make. When he walked in, Renee's eyes found his immediately. "You look terrible," she said softly. "You're not exactly runway ready yourself." He sat beside her bed, taking her hand carefully around the IV. "I heard they arrested him," she said. "Whitmore. Federal charges. Trafficking, attempted murder, racketeering. He'll never hurt anyone again." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "The girls? Safe. All of them. Zoe's in foster care with a family who specializes in trauma. She drew you a picture." Renee closed her eyes. "I was so scared I wouldn't get to see how their stories ended." "Hey." Holden's voice was fierce. "You're going to see everything. You're going to watch them graduate, grow up, become artists and doctors and whatever else they dream of being. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. They sat in silence, fingers intertwined. Holden, she said finally, if something goes wrong tomorrow, don't. Listen to me. Her grip tightened. If something goes wrong, I need you to know that loving you was the easiest, best decision I ever made. You challenged me, supported me, stood beside me even when it was dangerous, and I don't regret a single moment. Holden's vision blurred. Renee Parker. His voice was fierce through tears. You don't get to give me a life worth living and then leave. That's not how this works. She smiled sadly. That's not always our choice. He pulled out the velvet box he'd been carrying, the one he'd bought when he'd finally understood that forever wasn't long enough. With shaking hands, he opened it. Then choose this, he said. Choose to fight. Choose to stay. Choose to marry me and spend the next 60 years teaching kids and changing the world. His voice broke. Choose me, Renee. Choose us. She stared at the ring. A simple platinum band with a single perfect diamond. And fresh tears fell. That's not fair, she whispered. I know. Using a proposal as emotional blackmail. Desperate times. She laughed through her tears, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. You're supposed to do this somewhere romantic. There's nowhere I'd rather be than beside you. He slipped the ring onto her finger. So what do you say? Renee looked at the ring, then at Holden, then back at the ring. Ask me again after the surgery. Why? Because I want to say yes when I'm not terrified. She met his eyes. I want to say yes to a lifetime, Holden, not to a goodbye. He understood. God, he understood. Then I'll wait. I'll wait right here, and when you wake up, I'll ask you properly. Promise? I promise. She pulled him closer, and he held her like she was made of light. Outside the room, he could hear the kids laughing softly, could feel the weight of everyone who loved her. They're all here, he told her. Every single child from the center. Imani. James flew in. Even Zoe. Renee's eyes widened. Zoe's here? She wanted to thank you. For saving her. Fresh tears fell. I didn't save her. I couldn't not try. That's what makes you extraordinary, Holden whispered. You see what needs to be done, and you do it. Consequences be damned. It's going to get me killed one day, she joked weakly. Not today, Holden said fiercely. Not tomorrow. Not for another 60 years at least. The surgery took 7 hours. Holden sat in the waiting room with an unlikely family. Billionaire venture capitalist beside elementary school children, community organizer beside private investigator. They played games. Trinity taught James how to draw. Imani ordered pizza that nobody really ate. And they waited. At her 5, Zoe sat beside Holden. Mr. Anderson? Her voice was small. Is Mrs. Renee going to be okay? Holden looked at this child who'd survived horrors he couldn't imagine, who'd found the courage to trust again. I hope so, Zoe. I really hope so. She told me something, Zoe said quietly. The last time I saw her. She said that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means deciding that something else is more important than fear. Holden's eyes burned. That sounds like her. She's the bravest person I know, Zoe whispered. She stood up for me when nobody else would, even when it was dangerous. She's brave, Holden agreed, almost too brave for her own good. Zoe smiled slightly. That's what makes her Miss Renee. At her 7, the surgeon finally emerged. Time stopped. The entire waiting room stood as one. Children, adults, all holding their breath. The surgery was successful, the doctor said, and the world started spinning again. We were able to repair the damage to her heart. Barring complications, she should make a full recovery. The waiting room erupted. Trinity grabbed Holden's hand. Imani covered her face, shoulders shaking. James squeezed Holden's shoulder hard enough to bruise. And Holden sank into a chair, put his head in his hands, and wept. They let him see her first. She was in recovery, groggy but awake. And when she saw him, her entire face lit up despite the breathing tube, despite the monitors, despite everything. The nurse removed the tube gently, and Renee's first words were, "Did everyone go home?" Holden laughed through tears. "No, they're all still here. Every single person who loves you. That's a fire hazard. Probably." He sat beside her, taking her hand so carefully. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck. A very medicinal truck." He laughed again, relief flooding through him in waves. "The doctor says you're going to be fine. Full recovery." "Good." She looked at him seriously. "Because I have an answer for you." His heart stopped. "Renee, you just had surgery. You don't have to." "Holden Anderson," she interrupted, voice stronger now despite the exhaustion. "Are you going to ask me or not?" Joy burst through him like sunrise. His hands shook as he knelt beside her hospital bed, still holding her hand. "Renee Parker," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you let me stand beside you while you change the world? Will you teach me every day what it means to be brave, to be good, to be worth something beyond money and power? Will you choose me the way I choose you completely, irrevocably, forever?" "Yes." She smiled, radiant despite the hospital gown and machines and everything. "Yes, I will choose you. I will choose us. Every single day." He kissed her softly, tasting salt from both their tears, and felt the weight of the last 72 hours lift. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Now go tell those kids I'm okay before Trinity organizes a jailbreak." He laughed, pure and free, and kissed her again before standing. "One more thing," Renee said as he reached the door. "Whitmore. Federal custody. Multiple charges. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison." Her eyes closed briefly. "Good. You did that," Holden said softly. "You saved those girls. You brought him down. You changed everything. We did it," she corrected. "Together." "Together?" he agreed. When Holden opened a waiting room door, 15 children rushed him with questions. He held up his hands, grinning. "She's awake. She's okay. And she wants to see you all. But the nurses said only 2 at a time, so we need to take turns." Trinity pumped her fist in the air. Zoe burst into tears of relief. The room filled with cheering and laughter and so much joy the walls could barely contain it. Imani pulled Holden aside. "So, did you ask her?" He held up his left hand, showing Renee's engagement ring now on his own finger. She'd insisted he wear it until she was well enough to properly wear it herself. She said yes. Imani hugged him hard. About time, billionaire. About damn time. 1 month later, Renee stood in the community center, watching her students work on a new mural. She still tired easily, but every day she was stronger. Zoe was there, a permanent fixture now in the after-school program. Her art had transformed from dark to hopeful, from shadows to light. She was drawing a garden, full of flowers reaching toward the sun. Holden arrived with dinner. He'd taken to joining them every Tuesday and Thursday, though now he helped teach instead of just washing brushes. The kids adored him, especially when he told terrible jokes. As they locked up that night, Renee took his hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For standing with me. For not asking me to be smaller or safer. For moving heaven and earth when someone tried to hurt me." She looked up at him, those clear brown eyes full of love. "For choosing me when it would have been easier to walk away." "Easier?" Holden pulled her close. "Renee, loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. Everything else is just details." She kissed him as the sun set over Brooklyn, as children's laughter echoed from down the street, as life, complicated, beautiful, hard-won life, continued around them. The wedding was small, just family and the kids from the center, held in the warehouse where they'd first fallen in love. Renee wore a simple dress. Holden cried through his vows. Trinity was the ring-bearer and took her job very seriously. Zoe read a poem she'd written about gardens and second chances, and people who believe in you when nobody else will. And when the officiant pronounced them married, the entire warehouse erupted in cheers. That night, in Holden's penthouse, now their penthouse, Renee stood by the window looking out at the city. "What are you thinking?" Holden asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "That I almost missed this," she said quietly. "That if Whitmore had succeeded, I never would have gotten to marry you. Watch Zoe heal. See what comes next." "But he didn't succeed." Holden's voice was fierce. "You survived. You're here. And you're going to be here for a very long time." She turned in his arms, smiling. "Promise?" "Promise." He kissed her forehead. "We have kids to teach, worlds to change, 60 years of adventures ahead of us." 60? She raised an eyebrow. "That's all I get?" "Fine. 70. 80, if you're nice to me." She laughed, and it was the sound of joy, of victory, of love that had been tested and proven true. Outside, New York City blazed with light. Somewhere in that vast metropolis, other children needed saving, other stories needed telling, other battles needed fighting. But tonight, in this moment, Renee Parker Anderson and Holden Anderson simply held each other and marveled at the beautiful, complicated, hard-won life they'd chosen together. Sometimes love doesn't just change us. It challenges us to become who we're meant to be. This is for everyone who's ever stood up when it was easier to stay silent, who's chosen courage over comfort, who's believed that one person can make a difference. You're right. You can. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone will stand beside you while you do it.